Welcome back to Off the Cha, where we talk about taboo topics over tea through a multicultural lens. So grab your cup and let's get sipping.
Clink. On today's episode, we'll be talking about TCKs and what exactly that is, starting off with the textbook definition and then going into the common themes and then finally wrapping up with where do we go from here. So let's start off with what exactly is TCK? What is the textbook definition that's out there? Jenny, do you want to start with what you found on that?
So this was a term coined in the 1950s by a US sociologist, and this basically describes children who spend their formative years in places that are not their parents' original homeland. And so this has been made very common nowadays with globalization. But let's talk about all the three cultures that is involved in this term. So firstly, we have the first culture, which is basically your passport culture, right? Your citizenship, where your place of origin is. And then we have the second culture, which is where you're currently residing in. So what we like to call the host culture. And then we have the third one, and this is the tricky one, right? Where a lot of people kind of are confused. But this is basically a mix of 1 and 2 and the bridging culture of what we make of 1 and 2, and we kind of turn it into a third culture of our own.
Yeah, I think that hearing TCK for the first time, it was like, you know when you see a color in your life, like you see it all around you, but then you don't know it has a name. And then suddenly, like it has a label, like blue, like the first person to ever call blue, like give it that dimension. It kind of was that sort of experience for me where when I was reading through the definitions together with the research that we found on this topic, I kept seeing myself in all of those facts and figures that were being presented. But living through the TCK experience, I had never heard the term third culture kid.
Right, it's like when your experience is suddenly now a concept.
Yeah.
It's a thing, like it's not just in your head.
Like a concrete thing that not only you experience, but there's so many people around the world that have this unique blending of cultures. And then I thought one really interesting note I found to add on to what you said was like, not only is it a blend of cultures, but it's almost like a bridging culture that is an amalgamation of your passport origin, and then where you live, but also like the bits and pieces that you pick up along the way that help you relate to people in new places. So like bridge your connection to people and then bridge your connection to new cultures, and then it's this like new point of connection basically.
Right. I think there's a big emphasis on the third culture for TCKs, because it's this third one that gives you a sense of belonging almost. It's like how you understand the world.
Exactly. Like we talked about in the first episode, how we really bonded over that common experience at that point in our time when we first met, of trying to readjust to Southeast Asian culture after having lived abroad our whole lives, gone to school abroad, and also when we talk to our friends and see that they also have these similar experiences and that they weren't having these platforms to talk about it. And then the recent experience, which we talked about, where you told me the term and you're like, this might be something interesting to talk about, TCKs. And I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before.
That's us.
Yeah. And
I think it's also important to say that it's not just international school kids that make up TCKs, but it's also like, think people who have moved because their parents are in the military, or people have to relocate because of issues back in the home country.
Yeah. So now that we've defined TCKs in their straightforward dictionary definition, we want to go into exploring the common themes that we found, firstly through research, and then secondly through personal experience that TCKs often share. Starting off with sense of identity.
Let's talk about the research in the article that we both read, and we'll link that as well if anyone is interested in reading that. But it basically states that TCKs might change aspects of their self in attempt to interact with the host culture and social groups.
Yeah.
So think if you're moving around a lot, your sense of identity is kind of confused almost because you have so many different influences, right? So who are you when you're living in Thailand versus who are you when you're living in Burma?
Yeah.
Who are you when you're living in Boston, right? And so you have so many aspects of identity that it's hard to just say you have one self. That's a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing is that we have so many.
Yeah.
And it's kind of confusing for us to identify, like, okay, who are we as a whole when we have so many different aspects playing into it. But the good thing is that it makes us really able to cope with change and really adaptable to different environments.
Yeah. Personally, I always saw that as a strong suit growing up, and like having to quickly adjust to new environments and new people and new cultures, and I took pride in that. But there was this feeling of being adrift for a little bit because it's like that chameleon effect, right? Having to shapeshift, exactly, like having to shapeshift all the time to adjust and make do and be successful where you are can wear down at like the core of you sometimes if you're not careful. So I think there are points where that happened, but now I'm kind of like reorienting myself so that, okay, like the strong suits, the positive aspects of TCK, of that identity, being adaptable, being flexible, we're keeping that.
Yes.
But also, you know, don't lose sight of who you are and what your values are and what you really care about and what's important to you throughout all of that. So it's like finding that
balance.
Yeah. How about
I
for
agree.
you?
I like what you said about kind of now as we're growing up and becoming adults, we get to that hard part where we have to, okay, now identify who are we, right?
Yeah.
Taking out all of the cultures and taking out of all of our experiences. Who are we at the end of the day? What are our values? What's important to us? And I think some things are good, and some things we're still trying to figure out, which makes it hard. But I think talking to other TCKs really help, and seeing that it's similar struggles, right? We're all kind of finding it hard to find that sense of identity when we have so much going on.
Yeah. The momentary panic attack that overcomes the question, like when someone asks the question, where are you from?
Oh my God.
I'm sure you even have a more complex experience with this because you're like, you know,
half. Yeah. But then they go on to ask, how is your English so good?
Oh yeah.
That one.
That's a heavy hitter.
That one. What do we say?
I think that's something that TCKs all over, like through the research and the videos and everything, like grapple with. And that's really interesting because that also ties into like the influence of international schooling, like attending an international school in different places throughout your life, and how that feeds into that third culture. Yeah. Like I read in some of the articles that I came across, it was like the international school experience is its own little mini universe.
Bubble.
Like it is a bubble. Yeah, it's a bubble within this bubble of third culture-ism, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, not only are you foreign, not only are you living abroad, but also you are attending school every day with people who come from all these different places throughout the world, and you pick up bits and pieces of their culture as well.
Right, like having teachers that are Australian, British, American.
Maybe this is not totally the reason, but definitely one of the reasons is, you know, international school makes all the kids, wherever you're from, you speak in English. Classes are taught in English, unless you go to like a French international school. And also another experience from being at an international school throughout my life is having to constantly like learn to say goodbye to people and friends. And so like that part of your identity is also kind of like the people that you surround yourself with, you know?
Relationships. Moving on to our second theme, right? Relationship gets really tricky when you're in a community that's always up and going. Like friends move every few years.
Exactly.
Teachers move. Nothing is constant in an international school almost. So let's bring back the article that we mentioned earlier. So it was interesting because they talked about the struggle of TCKs, especially children, right? How there could be a struggle in building intimacy, in companionship and deep friendships because of frequent relocation, and it serves as a protective mechanism almost, right? That we're okay with it now, that we're used to it. But in turn, that gives us a struggle in maintaining relationships because of this expectation that people are going to leave soon.
Commitment issues. I don't know her.
Abandonment issues, fear of loss.
Chipping
out the insecurities. Yeah, call me out.
I think that on top of the article that you mentioned where about the commitment issues, I think that there's one article that went in contrast of that research where it mentioned like actually TCKs have a longer adult TCKs
because of their childhood experiences and having to suffer from loss.
Yeah.
They seek the opposite when they're adults, right?
That's really interesting.
They want commitment. They want long-term commitment.
Exactly.
Yeah, they don't want to say goodbye anymore. They're done with that.
Do you resonate with that? How do you feel about that?
I don't think I'm there yet in my life. No. Okay, let's scratch that.
Oops.
I think up until very recently, I've had an issue with commitment.
Okay,
only because it's not normal. It's not normal. I mean, for the past, let's say, 5 years, I've moved 3 countries.
Right, yeah.
So you adapt to that and you get used to it. Let's go to the next theme, which is this idea of home. And I think you briefly talked about it earlier, but let's talk about it more, right? So you mentioned that it is based on a relationship and not a physical place.
Right.
Like if you ask me where my home is, right? I can go on a tangent on, okay, well, my mom's Vietnamese and I grew up and was born there, but I moved to Thailand, so that's also my home. And then I moved to San Francisco. I consider that my home. I lived there for 5 years and know the in and outs of, you know, SF. And then, you know, London is also my home.
Yeah.
So I can't, like, everywhere is home almost. And I'm probably going to have new home in the future. Like, it's not just set in stone. And I love that.
Yeah. Maybe this is a cliche.
Home is where you feel comfortable. Yeah, where you feel comfortable and at home. Like it's the feeling rather than a geographic location.
Yes. And going back to that quote, like, you know, you form your sense of belonging based on people, not physical location. It's like, where are our people? You know, that's where home is, and that can be changing all the time.
All the time.
Right. Right now, my people are here.
Bangkok is home. Yeah.
Bangkok feels home, but you know, my parents are still in Myanmar, and so when I'm with them, not necessarily when I'm back in Myanmar, but when I'm with my parents, I feel at home. You know,
I guess that leads us to moving back home.
Oh yeah.
So moving back to home.
Yeah. How about moving back home?
Reverse culture shock.
Oh yeah.
That's a big one, and that's something that I haven't even thought about. But like in my mind, I was struggling, right? Having to move back home from living, after living in, let's say, the UK or the US, and getting used to their cultural norms, getting used to their nuances and their languages and the way of life almost, and then coming back and just being shocked because it's so different and you're not used to it, even though you were born and raised here.
Yeah. Not only have you grown as a person and like changed in all these different ways and absorbed all these cultures into a third culture, and then but now the place that you knew or you thought you knew, where you were born potentially, like that place has completely moved on from your concept of it too, especially if you've been away for a certain amount of time.
We grew up here, but the place that we know here is the place that we experienced as a kid, and in that bubble, like international school bubble.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? So all I knew was being at ISB or being in my international school, having my little group of friends that I grew up with. But then coming back and those things aren't in the picture anymore, and trying to navigate what life outside of that bubble looks like, that's so difficult.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things in Asian culture that I had to relearn, or I had to, I guess, ask my mom about because my friends aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And then the work culture as well, like completely different to the Western work culture.
Yeah.
So these little things, as you grow up and as you kind of experience, and the relationships as well, right? They're so different than when you were a kid. Not just because the place has changed, but because you have changed in a completely opposite way.
The most shocking point for me, reverse culture shock, is, remember, I couldn't count to 100 until I was like 7 years old. I couldn't count to 100 in English until I was 7.
Okay.
And like, once I progressed through international schools all around, and then I came back to Myanmar for senior year of high school for 1 year. And I could not speak Burmese as fluently anymore. So it was like the language had resubstituted in terms of like, in terms of what my most fluent language was. It was now English. That cognitive dissonance, when I moved back with that language barrier, the language barrier being a barrier to my mother tongue, that was really shocking. That was reverse culture shock for me, for sure. Yeah. Knowing all of this now and sharing our experiences with each other, talking through the common themes of what it means to be a TCK, like the identity, the sense of home, and the sense of relationships and stability. What can we do? Like, where do we go from here as TCKs?
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Firstly, so we talked a lot about that hidden grief, right? And so really acknowledging that and bringing that to the awareness is important in order for us to process what happened among all of our previous relationships, so that it doesn't affect future relationships. But also celebrate the advantages that we've gained from being a TCK, right? Not just focusing on the grief and the negative parts, but celebrating it.
Yeah, also learning more about it, and we have the resources if anyone's interested in...
So we mentioned a couple articles that we'll link in our linked tree. We also have book recommendations, movie recommendations, and TED Talk that you could watch as well if you're interested.
And finally, what we can do, or what we can do together with everyone here, is potentially start to form a online or offline community of TCKs. So this is just an idea for now, but
it would be great for us to tell you to, well, go out there and cultivate a community with other TCKs, but that could be hard, right? Where do you even find these people?
Exactly. Like,
unless you kept in touch with your high school friends, which not a lot of people do.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's hard to keep relationships. And for me, high school was 10 years ago almost. If you guys are interested in an online community of some sort, maybe that be through Discord or
Instagram, LinkedIn,
anywhere.
Linktree,
Drop us a message.
Yeah, we'll have it in our video description somewhere.
Here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, here, there, everywhere. Any recommendations for now about where you would like to meet, what you'd like to talk about,
or
whether
comments
you're interested
from today's topic as well.
Yeah, share your own personal experience as a TCK, what that means to you, what that third culture means to you.
Was there anything that was surprising that we spoke about? Anything that you learned through today's episode? We'd love to hear it. And we hope to see you in the next. Cha-cha for now.
Cha-cha for now. Clink.
Woo!
Let's stop recording. How? I'll do it. I hope everything stayed on.
I'm gonna turn on this AC. It's hot. Oh my god.
Okay, nice.